Welcome to Private Parts of Wellness. And for this season, 2025, I think I would also call it the radical pause and other distractions. Because menopause, perimenopause, and midlife are nothing if not a series of distractions. Some are fun, some are strange, some feel like full body assault. I'm Jessica Badonsky. I'm a board-certified family nurse practitioner and certified menopause provider. And if you're new here, this is where we talk about sex, hormones, aging, menopause, and all the private parts of life that most people are too scared or too polite to say out loud. Quick disclaimer, I'm not your doctor. I don't know your labs. I don't know your story. This podcast is for education and conversation and not medical advice. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't, and if something really lands, take it to your provider. Let me start here. I've spent decades trying to fix a feeling I couldn't name. That sense that something wasn't quite right in my body. When I was pregnant with my first baby, and I knew that I had a phobia about things I couldn't control and things I didn't have the answer for. So I thought, well, I'll learn how to do inversions in yoga to prep for birth. And really to try and soothe that sense of unease with the unknown. I took Vitex in my 30s to help with my horrible PMS and Prozac in my 20s to reboot my brain and just to see the world in color. I was looking for a magic pill, the thing that would make me feel okay. And that can be said also for when I started HRT, because it really wasn't for the hot flashes and the night sweats, which I had been having for years. It was for my family's history of heart disease. So sometimes the magic pill is the thing. Sometimes it's hormones, sometimes it's therapy, and sometimes it's rest or support. But what if the thing we need isn't just physical? What if the that not right feeling is in our history, rooted in the survival patterns that we never turned off? And that's what we're talking about today, how childhood trauma might be shaping your experience of menopause and making it harder than it needs to be. This isn't about blame, it's about context, about knowing what you're working with. We're going to start with menopause, the brain, and who is living in your head. Perimenopause and menopause, and I'm just going to refer to it as menopause, the entire transition, isn't just about hot flashes. It's not just your period stopping. It starts in your brain, just as it did when you were going through puberty. Your hypothalamus and pituitary, they're running the whole hormonal show. If you've read The Menopause Brain by Dr. Lisa Mosconi, you know estrogen is brain fuel. It regulates your temperature, mood, sleep, memory, and focus. When estrogen drops, your brain feels it first. But what I didn't see enough of in that book, or in most menopause conversations, is what's happening behind the brain chemistry, what's running in the background. Whose voice is in your head? Who taught you what safety feels like or doesn't feel like? Those parts of you that are constantly stressed and can't even identify peace when it's staring you in the face. And that's where the ACE score comes in. So what is the ACE score and why does it matter? And what does it have to do with menopause? ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and it is a 10-question tool created in the late 1900s by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente, which is a hospital organization in the States. And it came about because a doctor, Dr. Vincent Felitti, noticed something that no one was talking about. His patients were struggling with chronic illness, addiction, and mental health. They weren't just unlucky, they had these histories of stress, chaos, trauma from early life. So they created the ACE tool to ask, is childhood adversity connected to adult health struggles? And the answer was yes, a profound yes. The ACE tool was strong predictive. The ACE tool has strong predictive validity, meaning it works. It doesn't tell you everything, but it gives you a window into what your risks are. And here's what we know about it. If your ACE score is over 2, your body is likely in chronic stress mode. Over 4, it's not just stress, it's toxic stress. Now, most of you will probably at least score 1, and you'll figure out in a second why. Toxic stress impacts your immune system, inflammation, mood, resistance, and yes, your menopause transition. Women with high ACE scores report 60% more severe menopause symptoms. That's not theoretical, that's lived daily experience. And it all comes back to your nervous system. It's a beautiful, complex network running everything from stress response to digestion. When you've lived with trauma, your nervous system gets wired for survival. It's almost as if there's this constant smoke alarm that never shuts off. It comes to my mind that maybe I have tinnitus, right? So maybe that's something like that. Your body becomes wired and tired for some of us and running on cortisol, unable to rest, stuck in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And that's not just in your head, it's in your gut as well. Your enteric nervous system, which is considered your second brain, lives in your digestive tract. And that's why people with trauma histories often have tummy trouble, bloating, constipation, nausea. That's your nervous system talking to your gut. Just a quick clarifier. This is not to say that, things like H. pylori, ulcers, people do not have physical problems that can be easily fixed and remedied with the proper medical treatment. I'm not dismissing that. I'm talking to those feelings where you've tried everything and it's still not getting it. Now, trauma-informed care has always been a part of how I practice, but I've recently started to use ACE tools directly in both my private and clinic patients. And let me tell you, the conversations that come up, the connections people start to make between their stories and their symptoms is really powerful. Especially when we think that we've gotten past it or it's resolved. Sometimes it's not. And when people see it clearly, something ends up shifting. And if this brings something up for you, know that you're not alone. Therapy, community, nervous system support are not luxuries. They are lifelines. And I love the quote by Audre Lorde. And I used to keep it in my office way back when. And I had it in Spanish, Arabic, and English. And it says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. Taking care of your body, your story, your healing, that is resistance. That's power, and it matters. So let's walk through the 10 questions and know that there is no judgment, there is no pressure. I want you to be kind to yourself. I want you to be gentle with yourself. And also feel free to skip it entirely. These are yes/no questions. And these are experiences that happened before you were 18. So I'm going to start with these questions. And again, do what you need to do to love yourself, to care for yourself. Whether that's curse me out, not public person, not in person, please, but, take a pause, whatever you need to do. Anyway, okay, here we go. Number 1, before age 18, did a parent or adult in your home often swear at you, insult you, or humiliate you? 2, did they act in a way that made you afraid you might be physically hurt? 3, did you often feel no one in your family loved you or thought you were important? 4, did you often not have enough to eat, wear dirty clothes, or feel unprotected? 5, was a parent or household member often drunk or high in a way that made them unable to care for you? 6, was your household member depressed, mentally ill, or suicidal? 7, did you witness your mother or female caregiver being physically hurt? 8, did a household member go to prison? 9, were your parents separated or divorced? 10, did someone 5 or more years older than you touch or force you to touch them sexually? If your score is over 4, I need you to know that you're not a failure. You're not a mess. It's not all over. You are someone whose body learned how to survive. Full disclosure, my ACE score is 7. My mom's is lower, and my oldest child, hers is lower. And to me, that's progress. I can say it's progress because when you hear my mom's story, and you can, because I interview both my mom and my daughter, I interviewed them a while back on the podcast, you'll think her score should be higher because she had a lot of capital T trauma. But anyway, it just shows that ACE scores are a tool and not the full picture because context matters. And I want to just add to that race matters too. I'm biracial, Black and Slovak, and I present white. That gives me a certain privilege in how I move through the world. But I also carry what it means to be Black in a world that doesn't offer safety or softness. Most studies, like the one I'm about to share, focus on white women. So racialized stress often goes unmeasured, but it's real. It shapes our bodies, our health, and our menopause. The DREAM study was a study that talks specifically about menopause, sexuality, and aging. So between 2015 and 2016, the Mayo Clinic ran the DREAM study. And that stood for Data Registry of Experiences of Aging, Menopause, and Sexuality. There were over 1,600 women, and they were between the ages of 40 and 65. So at that time, they were pretty firmly looking at Gen X and above. A little bit of the generation before, but pretty solidly Gen X. And what did they find? The biggest factors affecting menopause symptoms weren't hormones. It was psychological distress. Higher ACE scores equaled more intense symptoms. Pain, fatigue, incontinence, which means specifically stress incontinence, so laughing, peeing, coughing, peeing, running, peeing, and vaginal pain. Even when they adjusted for anxiety and depression, the ACEs still mattered. So again, menopause is not just about estrogen. It's about how our body learned to handle stress and whether it ever learned to stop. Because menopause is a stress test you can't really opt out of. Even when we take HRT, you're not stopping the process of the menopausal transition. It's just taking some of the pressure off. But here's the interesting thing that they did find in this study. Symptoms often eased 5 years post-menopause. So the anxiety, the brain fog, the distress, they settled. And when we go back to that book about the menopause brain, she talks about the recalibration that happens in the brain. And it also reminds me of 12-step programs, and it takes 5 years to get your brains back. So when you are in this period, this transition of sobriety, so this 5-year process, it seems to happen in menopause, it seems to happen in sobriety, and it's helpful to know that you're not losing your mind. Your mind and brain are adapting and changing and remodeling. So recently, the New York Times Magazine dropped an article with the headline, Why Gen X Women Are Having the Best Sex of Their Lives. And the internet went crazy over this. People were sending me the article and they're like, oh my God, it's our time. And did you see Baby Girl and Midlife? And is like Midlife, am I becoming my most liberated sexual self? I read it and I thought, what the fuck? Listen, I love sex. I've been studying sex for 15 plus years. I did graduate research on sex, on erotic nipple stimulation. I've had group conversations, led groups around sex over 60. And sex and having a sexual life is a quality of life issue. But this article was not what I was hearing from real people. Then I tried reading Miranda July's book, All Fours, which is mentioned in the article. And if you haven't heard of this book, it's about this midlife woman who goes on this grand sexual escapade for 3 weeks and like fucks a lot of people and, leaves her child and her partner at home for 3 weeks while she goes to explore herself. I could not get through this book. Now, personal rule, a little bit about me. I usually give a book to page 50. I kind of force myself to get through page 50. And then I say, okay, that's it. I'm going to put it down. I'll come back to it. It's not for me, whatever. I could get to page 34. I got to page 34 and then I thought, well, because I was going to be part of a book club, I thought, well, let me do the audiobook. Nope. Couldn't do it. Nope. Not for a minute. Couldn't stand it. And of course, going back to my ACEs score, I thought, what's wrong with me? Have I gotten uptight in my 50s? Am I missing out on some even greater sexual renaissance? Like, what's happening? And then I found a study that made it make sense. In 2023, researchers, Sadain, and there were a whole bunch of others, published a study in the Journal of Sexual Medicine titled Adverse Childhood Experiences and Sexual Dysfunction in Midlife Women. Is there a link? What did they find? They found that women with higher ACE scores reported significant higher rates of female sexual dysfunction. That's another tool. Sexual distress, sexual pain, and lack of desire increased as ACE scores increased. And even when they adjusted for things like hormone therapy, depression, relationship status, the effect remained. Again, meaning it wasn't about estrogen, and it wasn't just about being too busy for sex or the erotic expression. It was about the nervous system. Because if your nervous system doesn't feel safe, it's not going to prioritize sex. And that's not dysfunction, that's adaptation. Your body is prioritizing survival over desire. And the thing that got me about this article and this book is that they completely ignore that. I mean, all fours, that's not the job of that book, right? That book and that article focus on a very specific type of midlife woman, one with privilege, time, and nervous system capacity to explore their sexuality freely. But if you've lived in a life with high stress, trauma, childhood adversity, and even the accumulated weight of caretaking, working, and surviving, your body might not be in sexual peak mode. It might be in conserve energy and survive mode. And that is just as valid as a woman discovering their new kink in their 50s. All that to say, if you read this article or you tried to get through all fours and thought, what the fuck? You're not failing at midlife. Again, you are just working with a different operating system. All right, so let's wrap it up. And here's some stuff you can do. And this is where I would start. Number one, I would know your ACE score, and I would bring that information to your provider. And maybe they're going to learn something too. Number two, if you have a kid, have them take it. Some pediatricians do have you do the ACE tool in the office, and you would answer for your young kid. But anyway, not to get too much into that. The idea of having your kids do it is not to assign blame, but to understand and break cycles. Number three, and probably the top thing is, it should be number one, but whatever, support your nervous system. Because when you do, your body might actually start responding better. It'll respond better to the menopause tools that you are choosing, hormones, supplements, life in general. Now, if you that's it for this episode. I do plan on talking about men and their ACE score because I feel like so much of this conversation is around the feminine, quote unquote. So I do want to talk about men. Please do me a favor. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody who also might like it. You can comment, leave suggestions and topic ideas. Hit the bell if you're looking at this on YouTube, and subscribe. And if you want to bring this conversation to your people, that's what I'm doing in 2025. So I'll have a link and you can learn about the Radical Pause Salon experience. And you can hire me to talk to your group about menopause, sex, aging, and all the things. If you like this episode, please share it with somebody who also might like it. Comment, leave suggestions and topic ideas. Hit the bell if you're looking at this on YouTube, and subscribe. Also, come hang out in the Menopause Anarchist. Come hang out on Discord, because talking about menopause shouldn't be boring. I talk about tarot. I talk about psychedelics, and we can talk to each other there. That's it for today. Stay messy, stay curious, and take care of your private part.